Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate your time and interest in joining us today. We will wait a few more moments while everyone gets logged into Zoom for our webinar. As we wait, in case you missed the announcement at the last P3 webinar, the California Department of Education is offering professional development certificates to all attendees of this live webinar. The professional development certificate will be sent from noreply@gmail.com to the email address provided during registration. Please be aware that this is an unmonitored, no-reply email address. Please do not attempt to contact it. If you do not receive your professional development certificate within the next 2 weeks by May 13th, please reach out to us at upk@cde.ca.gov. A link to the mailbox will be shared in the chat shortly. Please note that the certificates will only be issued to those who attend the live webinar with the name that you registered and logged into this webinar with. Please double-check the name that is on the participant window to assure that it is how you would like your name listed on your certificate. Additionally, in case you missed the announcement regarding the recording, PowerPoint slides, and the resources listed from our most recent P-3 webinar, using class to promote effective interactions and build positive relationships in P-3 settings, held in November 2024, we would like to share that those resources have been posted to the California Educators Together. We will share more information on those resources in the chat. Next slide, please. Welcome to the CDE's Building Strong Foundations, Instructional Strategies to Support Assembly Bill 2268, English Learners Initial Identification, English Language Proficiency Assessment, and P3 Alignment. We are very excited to be here with you today. My name is Gekko Gulazemini, and I am one of the presenters of today's webinar. We have a few quick logistics to run through before we get started. We will be taking Q&A or question and answer in the Q&A feature in Zoom. So please feel free to communicate with us there and ask questions if needed. We will do our best to address them. Lastly, we will have the slide deck available for those who would like a copy after this webinar. I now have the great pleasure of introducing our Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, Cheryl Cotton, who will greet us with a welcome. Cheryl?
Hello, and thank you, GQ. I just want to say welcome to all. So glad that you have taken the time to join this professional learning opportunity. The focus around strategies to support foundational learning is so key and so imperative for all of our students. I apologize I'm not on camera this afternoon. I am in transit, but I do want to take a moment just to say welcome to you on behalf of our state superintendent, Tony Thurmond, and the rest of the staff here at the California Department of Education. We're here to support you. Thank you. I look forward to enjoying this webinar. GQ.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. We're really glad you're here today, and I now have the great pleasure of passing it over to Director Stephen Profiter. Stephen, next slide, please.
Thank you so much, GQ and Deputy Cheryl Cotton. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for Building Strong Foundations, Instructional Strategies to Support Assembly Bill 2268 and P3 Alignment webinar. I'm happy to say this is our 21st edition of the OFAB, or Opportunities for All branch, pre-kindergarten through third grade, or P3 webinar series. I would like to begin with some appreciation for the team that you see on here and those you don't, who work to make the magic of these webinars happen. These webinars take time to plan and prep for, and it's definitely a labor of love for this team. So thank you all. I'd like to introduce myself. You see me here, and today's speakers. I'm Stephen Profiter. I am the director of the Early Education Division at the California Department of Education. We are so happy that you have chosen to join us today. With me today from the California Department of Education are Alicia Moreno Ramirez, Director of the Multilingual Support Division, GQ, Administrator in the Language Policy and Leadership Office in the Multilingual Support Division, who you just heard from, and Ashley Metcalf, Education Programs Assistant, also in the Language Policy and Leadership Office in the Multilingual Support Division, who we will have the pleasure of hearing from during the webinar, as well as our panel discussion at the end of our webinar. Thank you all again for joining us today and speaking on this important topic. Next slide, please. So as we start this presentation, we'd like to go over a few of the common terminology and acronyms that you will hear throughout this presentation. So starting first with English Learner, or EL. ELs are students in the K-12 education system who have a home language other than English and with levels of English proficiency that indicate the need for programs and services that will support them in becoming English proficient. Next, we have Dual Language Learner, or DLL. DLLs are children, birth to age 5, who come from homes where a language other than English is spoken. They may be simultaneously learning 2 or more languages at the same time, or start learning a second language while continuing to develop their first language. And finally, we have Multilingual Learner, or MLL. MLL is an umbrella term that encompasses DLLs and ELs as described previously. I now have the great pleasure to pass it over to Alicia to review the California EL Roadmap Policy. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Steve. Before we transition to our wonderful presenters, we want to share some policy background, considerations, and the progress thus far on supporting multilingual English learner students here in our state. The California English Learner Roadmap, or EL Roadmap policy, adopted by the State Board of Education in 2017, established a coherent, aspirational vision for the experiences and outcomes of multilingual learners, inclusive of dual language learners and English learner classified students. The policy invites schools, districts, and early education programs to envision how multilingual learners will fully and meaningfully access and participate in a 21st century education from early childhood through grade 12 that results in their attaining high levels of English language proficiency, mastery of grade level standards, and opportunities to develop proficiency in multiple languages, recognizing that the foundation of such an experience is grounded in universal pre-kindergarten, or UPK, and high quality early learning and care. This policy also echoes an emphasis of assets-oriented perspectives around home language and culture. In addition to the State Seal of Biliteracy for secondary students established in 2012, the CDE offers biliteracy pathway recognitions, which begins in preschool as an optional recognition program focused on progress in listening, speaking, reading, and writing in one or more languages in addition to English. The biliteracy pathway recognitions is just one of a myriad of examples of how California is working to create bridges across P through 12 for quality, cohesive learning experiences for children and youth. To support the high-level language development for all multilingual learners, the California English Learner Roadmap Policy's mission, vision, and 4 guiding principles provide a foundation for implementation of high-quality education for dual language learners and EL students. Principle 4 of the policy highlights the goal of alignment and articulation within and across systems, through which multilingual learners experience a coherent, articulated, and aligned set of practices and pathways across grade levels and educational segments, beginning with a strong foundation in early childhood and appropriate identification of strengths and needs, continuing through reclassification, graduation, higher education, and career opportunities. UPK is a critical component of these pathways to foster the skills, languages, literacies, and knowledge students need for college and career readiness and engagement in a global, diverse, multilingual 21st century world. Next slide, please. Considering the California EL roadmap, our goal is to ensure that all multilingual learners can fully and meaningfully access and participate in a 21st century education from early childhood through grade 12. This includes a commitment to inclusivity and proper identification of all English learner or EL children, including those who are dually identified. Recently, the CDE collaborated with the National Center on Educational Outcomes, or NCOE, to develop the English Learner with Disabilities Toolkit. This collaboration involved several key activities, such as resource development, data utilization, training and support, and accessibility planning. This partnership aims to enhance the educational outcomes of dually identified students by equipping educators with the tools and knowledge needed to support these students most effectively. The English Learners with Disabilities Toolkit is designed to provide states and individualized education programs, or IEP teams, with 8 tools to better understand and support their students who are ELs with disabilities. The link to this toolkit will be dropped in the chats soon. And we'll now transition to Ashley for an overview of Assembly Bill 2268 and how the CDE is responding. Ashley?
Thank you so much, Alicia. I want to extend my gratitude to all of you here again today for taking the time to be here with us, and I hope you had an opportunity to go outside and enjoy some sunshine. All right, so today we'll be discussing significant changes by Assembly Bill, or AB 2268, that affect how we work with our multilingual TK students. Effective on June 14th, 2024, AB 2268 introduced key changes to our assessment practices. Namely, it exempts TK students from the initial and summative English language proficiency assessments for California, otherwise known as LPAC. And this applied starting in the 2024-25 school year. Now, essentially, this changes the approach on how we are defining initial enrollment and our assessment of our young learners in PK. And I love seeing all the hearts coming at us right now. Next slide, please. Now, in order to support local educational agencies in implementing the changes brought by Assembly Bill 2268, the California of Education has developed a comprehensive FAQ document, as well as a guidance letter that address key areas, including home language survey, English language acquisition status, accountability, funding, compliance and monitoring, and assessment. I want to point out that this FAQ document was built with input from the Regional English Learner Specialists, the RELs, as well as the Bilingual Coordinators Network to ensure that it meets the most pressing questions in the field. So let's start with the HLS, which still remains a critical tool in our process. Now, while LPAC requirements have changed, LEAs should still continue conducting the HLS during TK enrollment. This helps educators identify students who may benefit from additional language support in TK. To aid with parent engagement, the CDE has created an optional sample letter that you may use to communicate with families of multilingual TK students. You can find that resource, along with its translated versions, under the What's New section of the Multilingual Learners webpage. And just a note regarding HLS corrections, parents can only make changes to the HLS before the initial LPAC administration. The HLS is completed only once during initial enrollment, so accuracy is crucial. I want to emphasize to make sure that we are working closely with families so that the information is accurate from the get-go. Now, that being said, if a correction of classification needs to occur, please refer to the correction of classification process document that we will drop into the chat. Next slide, please. Okay, so for CalPADS reporting, educators should continue to enter an English language acquisition status of TBD if the HLS indicates a primary language other than English or American Sign Language. And I want to pause now for emphasis. It's important that these students should not be referred to as TBD students. Instead, the CDE is recommending that we refer to them as multilingual TK students. When students transfer between districts, ensure that the HLS be placed into their cumulative file so that the documentation can follow them to their new school. Next slide, please. All right, so this is really the meat here, assessment changes. The change here is that there's no longer a required English language proficiency or ELP assessment for TK students at this time. So therefore, TK students will not be identified as English learners for the purposes of Title III. And while there is no required ELP assessment for TK students, there are several examples available that may be appropriate for multilingual TK students as formative tools. LEAs need to determine what is best for their students. Additionally, we need to be particularly careful with grade placement, especially when moving students between kindergarten and TK. These moves can affect CalPADS and TOMS reporting, so please follow your LEA LPAC coordinator's guidance very carefully. And to help resolve issues, if a TK student has inappropriately been marked as a kindergarten student, CalPADS has released flash number 286 with scenarios and resolutions. Next slide, please. So while formal assessment requirements have changed, our commitment to supporting multilingual learners remains as strong as ever. The CDE strongly encourages providing language support and development services for multilingual TK students. These services should be based on the Home Language Survey, as well as the TBD ELAS status. Now, this services first approach aligns with the EL Roadmap policy and emphasizes supporting English language acquisition as part of a high-quality TK experience. Now, to support this work, there are professional development opportunities available on the CDE Multilingual Learning Resources webpage, as well as a parent toolkit for multilingual education that contains PowerPoint slides as well as printable guides. So we hope that you can find that useful. In terms of progress monitoring, please continue to use the ELA ELD framework along with the PT-KLF, or the Preschool TK Learning Foundations, as these resources outline key skills and knowledge in the language and literacy development domain, supporting both home language and English language development. Next slide, please. Okay, so compliance updates. Regarding compliance for the 2024-25 federal program monitoring, the Technical Assistance and Monitoring Office will not issue findings related to LPAC and TK students. Instead, reviewers will provide technical assistance as needed. Thank you, everyone. I'm now going to pass it back to Steve to introduce our very first guest speaker of the day.
You, Ashley, for providing the background on behalf of MSD regarding AB 2268 and how the CDE is implementing. We will now continue with our agenda for today's webinar and introduce our first guest speaker for today, who I'm really excited to introduce, Carolyn Kralot. Carolyn is the Director of Policy at Early Edge California, where she leads the organization's policy and advocacy efforts to support children and families across California and nationally. She comes to the organization with nearly 2 decades of experience in early childhood education, having worked primarily supporting dual language learner students and teachers in the classroom across several roles, including site supervisor, academic coordinator, English learner specialist and coach, and curriculum developer. She is also proficient in Portuguese, French, and Spanish, and is raising her 2 young children as multilingual learners. Love that. Thank you for joining us today, Carolyn. It is a pleasure having you here with us to share your expertise with California. I will now pass it over to you, and I think I'm supposed to say next slide also. So.
Thank you so much, Steve, and it's my great pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining and for, to learn more about how we can support our multilingual learners in transitional kindergarten. So I want to share first just a little bit of background and context about what's happening in California and about AB 2268. And Early Edge was one of the proud co-sponsors of AB 2268 alongside our partners at Californians Together and CABE, California Association for Bilingual Education, and authored by Assembly Member Moritsuchi. So first, just sharing the context about expansion in California to become, the state with the largest universal pre-K program in the nation. So it's a very exciting time for California. And as part of that, TK is also expanding to a younger and younger population of children. And then we also know that here in California, we have a very large and growing population of multilingual learners who come from languages where English is not the home language. And so that percentage is actually almost 60% in California for children birth to age 5. So we're really talking about the majority of the state. And so really needing to ensure that we're really supporting the needs of our multilingual learners. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, with the expansion of transitional kindergarten to now include all 4-year-olds, we're really expanding to younger and younger 4-year-olds. And by full expansion, we'll be serving children who are not even yet 4 years old. And so, the requirement of using the English Learner Proficiency Assessment of California that was really designed for older 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, we were very, very concerned at Early Edge about the developmental appropriateness of this assessment for very young children. Next slide, please. And so we're excited that the governor signed AB 2268, and so now we're not going to be using developmentally inappropriate assessments to identify our students' language needs in transitional kindergarten. Another key point about the LPAC assessment is that it also assesses reading and writing skills, and we know from working with young 4-year-olds that they are definitely not reading and writing, and so we do not want to be assessing them on their literacy skills. We just want to learn about where they are with their language development and how we can better support them. Next slide, please. So as was mentioned, now effective immediately starting in June of last year, TK students are exempt from being assessed using the LPAC assessment. Next slide, please. And so now in terms of next steps, Early Edge and our partners at the state are working to identify a long-term solution for how we can identify and support our multilingual learners in TK settings, including how are we securing funding to support their needs and requirements to ensure that we're really helping them develop their English and their home language. And so positive news was in the governor's January budget proposal, there was the inclusion of a $10 million allocation for identifying a TK language screener that would help support this effort. And so we'll stay tuned until the final budget to see if hopefully that is included, and we'll be moving forward with the next steps around that. Next slide, please. So in the meantime, how can we ensure that we're really supporting the needs of our multilingual learners without this additional screening and requirements in place? So as Ashley mentioned, the state is still really encouraging supports for children who are multilingual learners, and according to the Home Language Survey, identified as TBD and speaking a language other than English at home. So I want to share some resources that Early Edge has put together with our partners, specifically for how we can support our multilingual learners in transitional kindergarten settings. And I'll put the link here in the chat for the landing page. And so you'll see on this resource page, we have one resource specifically for principals and administrators, one specifically for teachers on how we can create welcoming how we can create welcoming environments and support our multilingual learners in TK classrooms, and one specifically for families on the benefits of bilingualism and how they can support their children's home language development. So next slide, please. I'll just share a brief overview of what's included in each of those resources. And definitely recommend that you check them out. They're really full of resources and links to additional resources, and they're available for you online. And so the first one specifically for principals and administrators, really helping, recognizing that TK is becoming universal in California. So kind of the TK that they have grown to know it's not the same anymore. We're now serving much younger children. And so along with that comes different developmental needs. And so what might have been appropriate, similar to the LPAC, what might have been appropriate for those older children is no longer appropriate for those younger children. And in the same way, how are we ensuring that we're making our program appropriate for multilingual learners and their families, really supporting home language, building connections with families, helping them understand the critical role that home language plays in the early years, and that not only is it an optimal time for bilingual development, for home language development, English language development, but that when we have a strong foundation in the home language, it makes it easier to learn English. And the opposite is true. If children do not have a strong foundation in their home language, it's harder to learn English. And they're also very susceptible to losing their home language if they enter English only programs and do not have the opportunity to continue their home language development. So really encouraging families to continue that home language development and as much as possible in the program as well. Next slide, please. So this resource is really specific to teachers and how they can create welcoming environments for their multilingual learners and support their needs. So this, of course, is how we can create environments that are reflective of children's language and cultural backgrounds and that help them feel supported. And then also, being intentional with our language supports and learning more about how we can support second language acquisition and the needs of multilingual learners in TK settings. Next slide, please. And finally, the resource for families is really centered on sharing the benefits of bilingualism and the important role that the home language plays in English language development, in allowing children to reap the benefits of bilingualism. So just share some key strategies as well as many links to resources for how they can continue to develop their home language at home. Next slide, please. So next, I'm just going to provide a quick overview and then turn it over to our partner at American Institutes for Research, but just wanted to share another very important resource that's available, and it's the Multilingual Learning Toolkit that Early Edge was involved in developing with many of our partners, including the American Institutes for Research. And so we're really excited to share information and the resources that are in there. And as this webinar focuses on P-3 alignment, this is a great resource as it's really specific to supporting multilingual learners across preschool to third grade settings. So I'll now pass it over to my colleague. I think actually Alicia is going to introduce her. So hi, Alicia, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
Thank you, Carolyn. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and all of the connections that you made. CDE really appreciates the opportunity to partner and collaborate with lots of folks in the field. And we really appreciate the thoughtful solutions offered by Early Edge for supporting multilingual children, as well as thank you for sharing the free resources available to support the field. So we will now transition to our next guest speaker, Dr. Rebecca Berge, EDD. Rebecca is a principal researcher at the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, and an esteemed thought partner of the CDE in a lot of fronts. Her primary work involves conducting research that supports the education of multilingual learners, analyzing policy with a lens for multilingual learners, and providing technical assistance to schools and districts with multilingual student populations. Some of Rebecca's current work includes developing English learner strategic plans for large, linguistically diverse urban districts and building capacity of coaches and teachers to support multilingual learners in math instruction. Dr. Berge has over a decade of experience working with multilingual students, including as a national board certified secondary ESL teacher and as a coach of pre service and in service teachers. She is also bilingual in English and Spanish. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us today. I will now pass the mic to you. Thanks for being here.
Great, and thank you all for joining today. It's exciting to see so many people with us. So we can go ahead to next slide. So I'm going to introduce today the Multilingual Learning Toolkit for Educators, which Carolyn gave a preview of. So excited to dig into this resource with you all. Go ahead, next slide. So I'll begin with a background and purpose of the Multilingual Learning Toolkit. And next slide. The Multilingual Learning Toolkit is an online hub for research-based key principles. It has instructional strategies, as well as associated free, practical, and easy-to-use resources that are geared towards educators who teach pre-K through third multilingual learners. As a resource library continues to grow, make sure that you check back in often and stay connected for the latest updates. You can fill out the short sign-up form at the bottom of the page so you stay updated on those resources. Next slide. The key audiences for this website and platform are the teachers and caregivers across all different settings, administrators, as well as higher education faculty. Next slide. Let's get started with the research overview that contributed to the Multilingual Learning Toolkit. And next slide. The structure of the Multilingual Learning Toolkit is developed from a synthesis of key research about multilingual learners. Specifically, we consulted research synthesis that have been vetted by numerous sources, such as the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide, a recent report by the National Academies on promising practices for multilingual learners. And we used these research synthesis. We also dug deeper into those particular practices and consulted the research studies themselves, looking for themes across several studies. Finally, we also drew from and consulted recent guidance documents from California, such as one that we mentioned earlier, the California EO Roadmap, the Preschool Foundations, the California Best Practices for Young DLLs, Research Overview, among others. The goal of this work was, as researchers who've been working in the California context, we wanted to review the landscape of what research tells us and distill it in a way that remains true to the evidence, but also very usable and relevant for educators. In doing so, we recognize the need to first establish some key foundational principles, which you will see here. As you can see, these principles are grounded in research and supported by citations. But we call these principles because they aren't necessarily the strategies that you will directly implement in the classroom, but instead foundations for doing this work. Next slide. So that first principle is all young children can acquire more than one language at once and achieve high proficiency in both languages. We know that young children starting in infancy have the capacity to learn more than one language simultaneously. Home language development also plays an important role in English language development, as well as developing a language other than English will not impede or harm the English acquisition. So rather, a strong base in the home language can actually help to facilitate English acquisition. Also, the earlier that children are regularly exposed to two languages, the more likely they are to develop that bilingualism. Next slide. Our next principle, bilingualism is a strength, and it's associated with many academic and social benefits. Bilingualism has linguistic, academic, cognitive, and sociocultural benefits. These benefits are most likely to occur when a child achieves high level of competence in both the home language and English. Such benefits make it clear that bilingualism should be actively fostered and celebrated. You can see this section for more information on how bilingualism benefits individuals and is associated with many academic and social benefits. Next slide. Strong partnerships with families using two-way communication are also especially powerful for multilingual children. Engaging in such a communication in which teachers and families learn from each other can build strong homeschool partnerships. Families have assets and skills to bring to the classroom setting and important knowledge about the child and culture to share with teachers. And teachers can share important information about the child's learning with families. And next slide. Oops, let's go back one. We also see that multilingual children benefit from high quality instruction in both languages that is aligned with their language skills and their background. So multilingual learner children enter the classroom with language backgrounds that may or may not be shared with their classmates and teachers. It's the role of the teacher to learn more about and understand best practices that they can use to promote these children's learning. To gain this understanding, educators need to build their knowledge of dual language acquisition and instructional strategies that integrate content and language development in both languages. In doing so, teachers can cultivate an asset-based approach to instructing multilingual children. This approach also includes an intentional focus on cultural responsiveness and anti-bias training. Educators develop this understanding through professional development opportunities. And we know these are most effective as part of continuous, content-focused, and job-embedded experiences. Next slide. Within this introduction, we also look at important considerations from the context and conditions that educators are working in. And this helps to provide guidance for thinking about how to integrate the research-based evidence in your particular site or context. This includes questions and considerations for the following. For example, how linguistically diverse is your classroom? What is the institutional context? What language model is being used at your site? And how accessible to all children are the learning opportunities? Next slide. So let's take a look at the toolkit, specifically focusing on some strategies for TK. Next slide. There are 11 different sets of strategies, including family engagement, social emotional health and development, classroom environment, oral language development, literacy development, bilingual classrooms, home language development, additional ELD strategies, content learning, assessment, and building educators' capacity. Let's look at one of these examples, oral language development, and learn about specific evidence-based strategies within the toolkit. When you go ahead in the toolkit and click on oral language development, you'll see a description of the research, as well as strategies and also resources for implementing this strategy. So for this example, oral language strategies should be used intentionally to promote both languages. Teachers should incorporate rich and high-quality language experiences with back and forth exchanges in both languages, as consistent with the program's language model. Such interactions can foster language development and achievement. Multilingual learners' children developing language skills may also include things such as code switching, which is when you're using words and phrases from both languages in a single sentence or exchange. In this section, we learned that while multilingual learners may have a smaller vocabulary in each of the individual languages and lack some translation equivalent, educators should account for the fact and encourage vocabulary use in both English and the home language, looking at the sum of their two languages and vocabulary. It's also important for teachers to serve as strong language models in the languages that they speak. By providing this high-quality, culturally appropriate language interactions in both languages relevant to children's experience, educators can help multilingual learners develop a solid foundation in both of their language, and this will lead to supporting future literacy and content learning. Next slide. So if you're in the site, you would scroll down after reading that research background, and you'll find within each of these topics and strategies a set of specific strategies broken down by pre-K through TK, grades K through 1, and grades 2 through 3. Next slide. And then in this section, you'll also notice strategies in action for oral language development in pre-K and TK. So when thinking about oral language in TK, you can find some specific classroom strategies. For example, in this section, you can read about a sample lesson by Dr. Linda Espinosa and Dr. Marlene Zepeda. In this example strategy, we hear about a sample teacher. You can learn about how teacher Laura decides to create a song to reinforce the targeted vocabulary and then finds ways to reinforce the vocabulary words through small groups, individual conversations, and large groups with related activities, as well as by rereading the book about buildings. So here we see teacher Laura knows that all children, especially multilingual learners, need to engage in conversations that are mutually interesting, contain academically relevant vocabulary, and extend each child's language abilities. Next slide. So you can go ahead and take the time to look at the website here and explore additional resources and strategies for use in TK across all of these 11 strategy areas. Next slide. And in closing, I want our participants to reflect on and think about using the Multilingual Learner Toolkit in your context. So reflect, what knowledge and skills do you or your staff bring? What could you or your staff benefit from learning more about multilingual students? Learn, how could the Multilingual Learning Toolkit be integrated into your professional learning? So through learning communities, through coaching, through inquiry cycle. And finally, apply. Think about how can you implement the practices from the Multilingual Learning Toolkit? What would help you to implement some of these practices? Thank you. I hope you are able to use the link in the chat and access more of these practices. And next slide. Thank you so much. And next slide.
All right, thank you, Rebecca, for that great presentation on the robust and high utility multilingual learning toolkit. We really appreciate the way that you helped us imagine how it will be used in practice. This resource is invaluable to a variety of audiences for its research-based key principles, instructional strategies, as you all saw, and free, practical, and easy to use tools for multilingual learners in P3 settings. We encourage all webinar participants to apply the insights shared today to strengthen your classroom and your school communities, promoting equity and inclusivity, and remembering to center the assets-based framework that views bilingualism as a strength. There was so much there to unpack and so much yet to explore. So let's transition into our panel discussion. Next, here we are. Our moderator for today's discussion panel is Ashley Metcalf. Ashley is a talented member of the Multilingual Support Division team here at the CDE. Her portfolio is focused on multilingual learners in early education, as well as dually identified students. Prior to joining the CDE, Ashley was a teacher and English language development, or ELD, coach and specialist in Fremont, working with kindergarten through second grade students. She was also a teacher and a teacher on special assignment at Roseville City School District, working with students in transitional kindergarten through fifth grade. Ashley will introduce our panelists who will be sharing their insights and their expertise through the panel discussion around today's topic of building strong foundations, instructional strategies to support Assembly Bill 2268 and P3 alignment. Thank you, Ashley, for moderating the panel, and I will pass the mic to you. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Alicia. As I said before, I'm really excited to be here, but I'm particularly excited for the panel discussion so we can have more of an organic conversation with these amazing women that you're about to see. So to begin introduction, I'm going to start with Dr. Anya Hurwitz. Dr. Anya Hurwitz is the Executive Director of the Sobrato Early Academic Language, SEAL, an educational nonprofit dedicated to centralizing the assets and needs of multilingual learners. The early part of her career, she worked as a teacher and administrator in New York City. She joined SEAL in 2014 and became executive director in 2017. Welcome, Anya. Second, we have Dr. Lisa White. Lisa is a senior researcher at AIR, specializing in early childhood development and education. Her expertise includes the development and instruction of young dual language learners, teacher professional development, or PD, early science teaching and learning, and measuring child learning and teacher and classroom quality. Lisa works on both evaluations and research practice partnerships in early education and has also taught preschool and provided PD for early childhood teachers in the past. She is fluent in Spanish and German and has lived experience as a dual language learner herself, growing up with a German-speaking mother. Welcome, Lisa. Next, we have Dr. Bernadette Pilar Zarmeño, and she is a lead faculty multilingual PK-3 specialist at Advanced College with over 20 years of experience in early education. She specializes in developing and teaching transitional kindergarten programs and biliteracy cultivation, particularly with dual immersion programs. Dr. Zarmeño has taught at pre-K through university levels and has expertise in training teachers and aides in biliteracy and language development. Welcome, Bernadette. Next slide, please. All right. Fourth, we have Amara Schoenberg Andrade. Amara is a transitional kindergarten teacher at a public Spanish dual language immersion school in the Oakland Unified School District. With over a decade of experience working with multilingual learners, she spent 9 years teaching kindergarten before transitioning to TK 3 years ago. Passionate about early childhood education, she strives to create an inclusive and enriching learning environment in partnership with families so young students can thrive. In addition to her work in the classroom, she is committed to advocating for sustainable teaching and learning conditions in Oakland through her involvement with the Oakland Education Association. Welcome, Amara. And then finally, we have Veronica Amador. Veronica is a dedicated educator with 23 years of teaching experience. She has worked in bilingual programs throughout her career and is an English language learner herself. Currently, she teaches in a 50-50 dual immersion program. Her parents, who were field workers, instilled in her the importance of being bilingual and pursuing a professional career. Veronica is part of the 7% of Latinas with a master's in multicultural education. Her children, who are second generation born in the United States, are fully bilingual and are her pride and joy. And welcome, Veronica. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we have introduced our panelists, I'm going to review with you the questions that I will be asking before we take down the slides to begin our panel. Question 1. What are some of the opportunities and challenges in the field for identifying and supporting young dual language learners in PK? Question 2. Which strategies from the Multilingual Learner Toolkit are you most excited about to bolster the experiences of P3 ML students? Question 3. How can schools and programs enhance family engagement to support P3 students' language development and educational success while promoting the value of bilingualism and preserving the asset of home language? Specifically, please share any thoughts as it relates to best practices for the home language survey and understanding the multilingual assets of students. And then finally, question 4. With California English Learner Roadmap Policy in mind, what are your hopes and expectations for the future of multilingual education in light of shifting requirements? We're now going to take down our slides to begin our discussion panel. All right, so good to see you all today. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start us off with question 1. So what are some of the opportunities and challenges in the field for identifying and supporting young dual language or multilingual PK students? I'd like to call on Veronica first, if I may.
Hi, thank you everyone for the opportunity. I feel that as a teacher and the challenges that our district is facing right now is that we have a large population of GAN students. So not having the tools to maybe help them or support them better. I think it's one of our challenges that we're facing right now. I come from a big district, so there's only 2 dual immersion schools in my district. So finding the support for teachers and students is also challenging because we're not a majority. So even though we need resources, it's something that they are getting better at it, but we still need more. Resources are always needed for language learners. I remember I taught kindergarten for 11 years, and when we started our dual immersion program, we began by giving them a language test just to balance out our classes. So it was something that was given before the school started, and it was language. So they would get a test, either they got it in Spanish and in English, and then from there we would balance out our classes, so they wouldn't all the monolingual kids ended up in one class, and then the bilingual kids ended up in another. The bilingual kids ended up in another. So that was a good opportunity for us as teachers to see what the kids came in with, what they brought from home, their language that they brought from home. Also, we've noticed another challenge that we've been noticing is that our populations are changing. So our numbers of language learners are increasing incredibly, and but they're not offering enough PDs for teachers to help their students out more. And that's it.
Thank you, Veronica. I want to echo that sentiment too, of just the student population changing over the years and really pushing for more professional development for our teachers so that we can support our multilingual learners. I'd like to pass it to Amara, because I know, Amara, you also work at a large district with a diverse population. So what say you? What are some of the opportunities and challenges that you are facing?
Yeah, so just like Veronica was mentioning, we also have a changing population here in Oakland. Oakland is a very diverse city. We serve tens of thousands of students in over 50 languages. And one of the challenges that we had at my particular school, I work at a 90-10 dual immersion school, where 90% of our instruction is taught in Spanish, starting in TK and kindergarten, and then it decreases, but in percentage as children grow. But one of the things that happened is that the program got very, very popular among English-speaking families. So what we ended up having to do is actually start testing for also, like Veronica said, we had to do a language test for incoming students that were entering TK in kindergarten to make sure that our classes were balanced. Because when I first started teaching here in Oakland, we actually didn't have, it was back in 2015, and we didn't have that kind of program or capacity to be testing incoming students. So I had a class full of 25 students. 20 of them or 21 of them spoke English at home, and only 4 of them spoke Spanish. So when I was giving my 90% of instruction in Spanish and only speaking Spanish to my students, I had a big lack of language models to make sure that kids were learning the routine. So I think we've grown our capacity in Oakland to be able to provide that language testing as kids are coming in, so that we can make sure that we're also serving our multilingual learners. In this, because as we've mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, like the teaching in students' home language is so beneficial to them, and so just making sure that the opportunity is there for the Spanish-speaking students as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's such an exciting kind of problem to have, right? That we have more and more people interested for their children to really become multilingual. I'm wondering if I can touch on Bernadette a little bit and your experience with any challenges or opportunities that you see outside of the teaching role.
Yes, well, hi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor and pleasure to be in a Zoom room with such amazing presenters, and we're all very like-minded, supporting our multilinguals as much as possible within the state of California. And I do want to echo some just personal story. I have 2 children, and I'm also raising them to be multilingual as much as possible. So they are learning French, Spanish, English, and hopefully Tagalog. So always uplifting as much as possible the languages that we model at home and that we model for our families and communities. So thinking about specifically our challenges, I'm not going to say challenges today. I want to change that wording and say opportunities, because a challenge could be seen as an opportunity. So one, really thinking about that mindset change. I think I'm lagging. No,
You're good on our end.
everybody could hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. So thinking about that mind shift change, right? Thinking about bilingualism, multilingualism as an asset and not a deficit. And for those of you who know me, you might have heard this story to where thinking about like English is so important, and growing up, it's like, no, there were so many other languages that we had to learn together. So really shifting that, and that was what, in the 80s, growing up, and now we are seeing a little bit more and more of it, like making sure that we have support for our families who are speaking different languages and really honoring it as an asset, not a deficit, as I said. That identification gap, there's so many opportunities right now to think about how could we identify and better support our multilinguals. What languages do they speak? Where do they speak those languages? Are they speaking Japanese in the garden, and they're speaking Chinese in the kitchen? So thinking about their vocabulary, how do we see them as rich multilinguals that have so much different vocabulary? And resources, as both teacher Amara and Victoria said, we need those resources for our teachers. Family childcare, all the way up into higher ed. We need as many resources as possible. And I love the multilingual toolkit with all the different resources there. And then really, we have the resources. Now let's cultivate our people in our communities, right? Con ganas, con amor, and make sure they are moving forward into the teaching profession and having communities have more dual immersion schools. And we can't have dual immersion schools if we don't have the educators, right? So making sure that we uplift our own educators and teacher preparation programs as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. The theme that I keep hearing throughout the response really is about preservation of home language. And I think that we're really trying to make sure that we're pushing forward that message, again, that is an asset, right? Home language is an asset, and the goal is not to be monolingual. So thank you for touching on that. Lisa, I'm wondering if you can bring in some research perspective on this.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone for being here today. And I'm excited to join you. And yeah, that's a great segue into just kind of from the research perspective, also from the practice perspective. There's a lot of reasons we do research is to inform practice, right? And so when we think about identifying dual language learners, there's a few different reasons we may want to identify, right? Initially, it might be for classification reasons or understanding who might need additional support, but then also critically, it's to understand the assets that these dual language learners have and hopefully promote bilingualism, right? And so by understanding in class and where they are and identifying where they are, it can help us start to inform how we interact with those children and their families. And so it's important to understand where their skills are to better address their learning needs and also engage in appropriate instruction for them. So ways that we can do this, like we have this home language survey resource, which is a wonderful way to understand the home language environment and the parents' perspectives on their children's language. And we also have direct assessments that we can use. And it's important for those assessments to be developmentally appropriate, right? That's one of the reasons that we're all here today to talk about that. And when we use assessments to understand where dual language learners are, to the extent possible, it's very advised to do that in both English and the home language so that we understand their full range of competency. And I want to just highlight one example from our research that actually, shows the importance of this, because we looked at basically in the First 5 California DLL pilot study, which was one of the kind of groundbreaking studies in the state of California and big investment from First 5 to understand the context and landscape of dual language learners in the state. And we assessed almost 1,000 dual language learners, 4 and 5 years old, across the state of California in the context of this study. And what we did was we first did a language screener to understand where those children were in both English and Spanish, so we could understand where on the trajectory they were of dual language learning. What we ended up with in our sample was a mix of children, as you might expect. There's a lot of diversity, right? When we say dual language learners, that's not one type of child, right? There's so much diversity that exists and variability in terms of the different skills that they have. So in our sample, we found that we had a mix of children who were classified as Spanish dominant, so they performed better on the Spanish language. We had balanced bilingual, so they did pretty equally in both English and Spanish. And then we had our English dominant group. And so when we looked at those three groups and assessed them on their math skills, we assessed them on their math skills in both English and Spanish. And what we found was that that the children who were in the Spanish dominant group, 70% of those kids performed better when they were assessed on math in Spanish. And so it speaks to the importance of understanding not just language ability, but also their content skills and their content ability in these different domains, because we really run the risk, if we only had assessed that Spanish dominant group in English, we would have underestimated their math skills, but they were actually performing, potentially at a developmentally appropriate level. So I give that example, and we have a brief that we can link in the chat. I think Nicole just linked that. Thank you, Nicole, for putting that in there, that describes this study and this finding a little bit more in detail. But I think that example just really highlights the importance of when possible assessing in the home language. Now, I do want to call out here that, of course, and we've heard this from our teachers here in the panel today, there are a lack of valid and reliable and developmentally appropriate assessments for children in languages other than English, and quite frankly, other than Spanish. We're doing okay in the Spanish domain. We have assessments that we can, use, but in other languages, like you were talking, Veronica, about the Afghani population that you serve, and some of the other, languages other than English and Spanish that we know our California multilingual learners are coming from these backgrounds, we don't always have the assessments to do that. And so I want to highlight that challenge, but just kind of lift that up. But even if we don't have, all of these assessments at the moment, I think it's important to start, and I think this theme is ringing true. We at least need to start by acknowledging their funds of knowledge that they have, and whether that's engaging with the parents to understand a little bit more, using some translation approaches, using AI. We have a lot of technology we can use now. All of these are different ways that even if we don't have the full spectrum of assessments that we might want to directly assess those children and their skills, we at least have ways to start to connect with families so that we can get closer to understanding where our dual language learners are on their multilingual journey. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually a question of mine of how can we assess in other languages, and I'm sure it wasn't only me who had that question. So thank you for addressing it, and I really like your positivity, making sure that maybe for question 4, right? Like, what do we hope for the future of multilingualism in California, and perhaps it's seeing more assessments in different languages beyond Spanish. For the sake of time, I'm going to move us on to question 2, but don't worry, Anya. Maybe I will start with you here. So question 2 says, which strategies from the Multilingual Learner Toolkit are you most excited about to bolster the experiences of P-3 multilingual students?
Okay, I'll get us started. Well, I also want to just appreciate being part of this important webinar and with such a wonderful group of folks. Always love to collaborate in these ways. So we at SEAL are very honored and excited that we have many, many resources hanging on the Multilingual Learner Toolkit. And so we are happy to contribute and big promoters of it as a resource across the field. At SEAL, we're all about comprehensive, rigorous, deep learning. That's really our focus. And so in that sense, and that's for all students, but we're centering the needs and the incredible assets of our multilingual learners. And so Individual strategies are really powerful, but it's actually in the coherence across them, in leveraging them in connection to each other. That's where you get the most powerful impact. And so, I want to just pick that up, that you have to start somewhere. So you can't do everything all at once, but there's so many resources within the Multilingual Learner Toolkit, and it's thinking about how they can work together and build a comprehensive learning experiences that you're going to get the most powerful approaches. With that being said, I'll uplift oral language development, because oral language development is absolutely critical. It's where we almost always start in our professional learning approaches. And we know that in order for all children, but certainly our youngest learners, to develop language, they have to be orally producing. It goes hand in hand. And so it's a critical place to start. Again, it's part of early learning framework, period, but it's ever more essential for multilingual learners. So I will uplift, I think it's going in the chat box. Thank you so much. Links are being dropped. The OLA, the oral language analysis strategy that we have listed there. I think there's even some videos of it in action. And the OLA helps teachers understand their students' language assets and needs so that they can plan that differentiated instruction accordingly. We also have content-based chants. So this is really about linking that academic or that robust, rich language that comes from the content and really building chants and songs around that. So linking language development with content, that's just how you get kids excited. It's how we develop these robust, rich language. We have examples of complex oral language in preschool and TK, and other resources to support oral language development. So those are just a few that I'd love to share.
And I want to emphasize something that you said too, that we know that these strategies, yes, they work for multilingual students, but they work for all students. And so that's just something that I wanted to elevate for this discussion. Bernadette, I was wondering, you said something in our pre-meeting of how you use some of these strategies to support newly arrived multilingual learners. Can you touch on that?
Yes, definitely. And as many of you know, I am the Multilingual Toolkit biggest fan. So many resources, and guess what? They're all free. So that makes it a whole different ballgame. And before I touch upon the multilinguals at the newcomers, I do want to say, based on Anya, thinking about specifically, she's like, there's so many resources. There's chants, there's this, there's that. I love the chants. If people want to sing with me, let me know. And some of you might be thinking, oh no, like I don't know anything about teacher preparation. How do I give this back, bring this back to my community, bring it back to my district? Within the multilingual toolkit itself, you have like PD hours, you have like outlines on how to create PDs, how to create Canvas courses, just how to create and really support all of our learners. And thank you for saying that, Ashley, because it's really, these are strategies not just for multilinguals, but strategies that are going to support all our kids, right? Who doesn't like to sing, and who doesn't need oral language like development in English as well, right? Even if you're an English monolingual learner, we're always getting our vocabulary to a whole richer level. And specifically thinking, Ashley, back about how to support newcomers and multilinguals, there are, again, lots of resources. One for families, definitely thinking about how to bring them in, how to talk to them about like, this is schooling and this is what it looks like for newcomers from 0 all the way up to 5. Also thinking about curricular development. What does that look like within your school, within your classroom, for dual language learners, for multilingual learners, and for newcomers? And then really those focusing on the strategies that Anya hit, but strategies that you can align across any topic, any subject matter, which is really important. So there's math strategies, how to support oral language throughout all the different fields, right? So yes, thank you. Lots of love there.
I think if you have never cracked open the Multilingual Learner Toolkit, be prepared to be overwhelmed in the best possible way. If you have a question, you can find it in that toolkit. So I also am a great great lover of it. So thank you, Bernadette. And again, looking at time, I'm going to move us along to question number 3.
I was just going to see if I could just hop in real quick, Ashley, just to say regarding the multilingual toolkit that all of the strategies in there are evidence-based and pulled from the research. So that was what my colleague Rebecca was highlighting earlier in her presentation. But this is soundly based on research. So if you're doing what's in the multilingual toolkit in your classroom, you can ensure that you're, giving the best possible instruction to your multilingual learners. So I just wanted to highlight that real quick before moving on.
Thank you. Yes, I do think that is really important. And I forgot to mention, so all research-based, which is great, right? We have the research to prove it and back it up. Okay, question 3. How can schools and programs enhance family engagement to support P-3 students' language development and educational success while promoting the value of bilingualism and preserving the asset of a home language? Specifically, please share any thoughts as it relates to the best practices for home language survey and understanding the multilingual assets of students. Amara, if I may call on you to kick us off, I would love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. I, first of all, am such a, what can I say? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought over here. So in terms of family engagement, I always start my school year by interviewing families to start building that important relationship and partnership in order to support their students. Because if you don't have that relationship from the beginning, the whole school year is just very challenging. So in the first initial interviews, we get to know each other, get to know a little bit about their student, how I can support them at school, what goals families have for their student, if there's any room for improvement. It's a very basic conversation. And then from that interview, I'm also able to get to know them a little bit more about their background. And so when we start school in Oakland, we're using the creative curriculum in our TK classes, which is such an amazing, flexible curriculum for early childhood. And for example, we did one of the big units that the students love is about clothing. And so during the clothing unit, I always ask families like, who has a cool job that you need special clothing for. So I try to get families, if they know, like for families themselves, I start there, but also if they know anybody. For example, a couple years ago, I had a family who kept bees in their backyard. So they had full beekeeper outfits, and they came in to show the students about that aspect of their family. And then also in Oakland, we have a very growing population of Mam speakers from Guatemala. It's an indigenous community that has been our growing population in Oakland. So these are families that speak some are bilingual in Spanish and Mam, but some, like the Spanish, can be a little bit limited. And so these students are growing up in a trilingual environment. And I had a family this year whose the mom was an expert weaver. And so for her to come in to show an outfit that she made for her daughter with the elaborate weaving strategies that come from their culture was just so special to highlight in the classroom as well. And the students got to watch a video of a child in Guatemala who knew how to do the weaving. And it was just very, bringing in families to the classroom is always one of my favorite parts of teaching young children, because they just can bring so much to our learning environment. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a genius way to pull in culture, right? And so I know sometimes we're afraid to implement something or a new unit because it might come across as maybe not, not the best implementation of it, maybe coming across as touristy, if you will. So engaging with the families and having them be the ones that pull in the culture, I think that's just a brilliant idea. Veronica, Can I ask you, so how are you engaging with families to support bilingualism or multilingualism while still preserving home language?
Something that I used to do when I was in kindergarten, when I taught kindergarten, was I would have like parent meetings, and then I would show the parents like songs they could listen at home to learn Spanish, and it usually was colors, letter names, letter sounds in Spanish. And I would recommend to the parents like try to watch cartoons in Spanish, just to, because English is everywhere. They can pick up the English everywhere, and even if they were not English speakers, that like Spanish was their first language, they still needed that oralcy to practice it, because there were some words they didn't know how to say it in English or how to say it in Spanish. So I always, showed parents like, oh, here's this YouTube link about, this song. It's really cute. The kids are gonna pick it up, and sure enough, they started learning their sounds, and they started learning their letter names. And because we had some parents that didn't speak Spanish, and then we had a lot of parents that didn't speak English. So then, because I work in a 50-50 program, my English counterpart teacher would give them links to songs in English. And then the parents were like, oh my God, I'm learning English with my child, because they would listen to the songs with them. And then the English parents were like, oh my God, I'm learning the alphabet in Spanish, because they were listening to the songs in Spanish. They would put them in the car as they're driving them to school, and that was their thing. So I think also being subconscious about, it's not just the kids, but it's the family as a whole. Like you have to give them tools, because like my mom only has a fourth grade education. She doesn't speak English, but it was like for her, it was like, you need to learn your timetables. I mean, math, she always helped me in math because that was the subject she could help me with, because numbers are universal. But with the other homework, she's like, you're on your own. Like you have to pay attention to the teacher. You have to, really focus on what they're teaching you, because I can only help you with math. And I feel that if my teachers would have provided that kind of support for my mom, then, I would have exceeded more in my educational life. So I think as teachers, I always look at my parents as my own parents. Like, what can I give them to help me with their child at home? So yeah, that connection is super, super important.
Can I build off of that? Just because I want to share. So the SEAL approach is really aligned with what Veronica's sharing, this notion of partnership, deep partnership. And we think of families as language resources. The family are so rich, language and culture resources. How are we partnering with them to ensure, how are we bringing them, their cultures, just as you heard Amada talk about, into the classroom? How are we bringing what we're doing into the classroom home, so that it can be further discussed and built upon in the home? So we do a lot of work around communicating with families in all different ways and across all languages. So certainly in the home language and all the home languages as best as possible, around what we're doing in the classroom. What are we learning about, so that the families can continue conversations, walk around, notice things in their own environments that are focused and that are connected to what the kids are doing at home, in school, and making that, we call it a homeschool connection. Also creating opportunities, little projects that families can do with their students at home that are related to the units, the content, and I mean, related to science, to a unit about the life cycle of insects, or to a unit about community workers, right? And really giving opportunities, low stress. So this is not like science fair, but making those opportunities, not once a year, actually, all the time. So every unit creating those opportunities, and then welcoming families into the classroom on a regular basis. Again, not once a year, not just at open house, but having culminating activities where families are regularly invited in. It could be a drop off, it can be a pickup, it can be in the evening, it could be at all three, because there are going to be families that can't make one or two of all of those, right? But just making that part of the culture. And we've seen that when a few teachers do it, it takes off. And, parents will say, well, my student in this grade is doing it, but why aren't they doing it in that grade? And then they ask their teachers, can't we do, we call it gallery walks. And that also is in the toolkit. I'm not sure if I shared it with Nicole earlier, so I'll drop it myself in the chat box. But having these gallery walks regularly are just powerful ways to build the partnerships with families.
Thank you, Anya. Yeah, I want to emphasize that it works two ways, right? It's not always families going to the school, but also the school coming to the families and making sure that they're entrusting us, right, with their babies for hours each day. And so it shouldn't be a big mystery about what is happening or what their child may be experiencing. So thank you for touching on that. Okay, so looking at the time, I have about 1 minute if anyone would like to answer kind of our final question for the day. With California English Learner Roadmap Policy in mind, what are your hopes and expectations for the future of multilingual education in light of shifting requirements?
I can hop in briefly just from the research side. I just hope that any policy shifts that are made help us implement evidence-based practices that we know from the research. That's probably not a surprise given where I'm coming from. But as a researcher who does applied research, I also think it's really crucial to have a fluid communication pipeline so that we're all in communication about what we're finding in the research and how that actually translates to practice. And sometimes we see a lag in terms of what we know from research implementing and changing practice. And so my hopes are really that we're able to make that pipeline more efficient to allow for really the best high quality education for all of our multilingual learners.
I'll jump in and say near term, this didn't come up yet. I want to make sure to get it in there. The DRDP is something that teachers should be utilizing, and they should be utilizing it in TK, right? And so there are opportunities, and we see our district partners, we have the honor to partner with districts who are, figuring out how to resource and train and invest in their multilingual learners and their teachers to support. And so what we see them doing is they are using the ELD receptive and expressive language development tools within the DRDP. So I just want to put that as we're in this in-between space. I'm trying to figure it out, promote that big time. And then I'll just say in terms of our state, we have to invest. We cannot expect to leverage this incredible asset. You heard the number, 60% of our children 0 to 5 have a language other than English in the home. If we are not investing in that credible asset, then we're taking advantage of it. We're going to lose it. And that has been the history, right? Language loss is a huge part of our history in this country. And our schools are a big part of that, our schools and our preschool programs. So we have to invest. Money is never the only solution, but we can't do it without resources. And so we really have to figure out how to prioritize the support for teachers, for families, for kids across the board.
Nicely said. I don't think I can top that, so I'm going to leave that there while we get our slides back up. I just want to reiterate some of the themes that we heard from today's panel. And gosh, what a brilliant panel we have, and we've had the pleasure to listen to kind of be a fly on the wall. But some themes that I heard really are making sure that we are seeing challenges as opportunities. I forget who said that, but I love that mindset. I think that was Bernadette. So see challenges as opportunities and making sure that we know in California, right, that multilingualism is an asset, and we want to move forward. We really want to invest in our students and support our students, even in times of uncertainty when, shifting policies may be happening. We're all in this together, and we're all supporting our multilingual learners. Thank you, ladies. I really appreciate your time with us today. Okay. So as mentioned at the start of the webinar, CDE is excited to offer professional development certificates to all attendees of this live session. Your certificate will be emailed to the address you used for registration. If you do not receive it by May 13th, please contact us via the UPK mailbox. And the link to the mailbox will be shared in the chat again now. And as a reminder, certificates will be issued under the name used to register and log in for today's webinar and are only available to live attendees. I'm now going to pass it to Alicia for reflections and closings. Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please.
Wow, what an insightful discussion and such pragmatic content shared by today's presenters. It's so beneficial to hear directly from experts who are enmeshed in serving kids directly each and every day. I want to take just a moment to say thank you to everyone that made this webinar possible so that we were able to address the critical topic of building powerful foundations through instructional strategies that will help schools, programs, and educators respond to the needs of multilingual transitional kindergarten students and support continued development of home languages for all children in P-3 settings. I want to thank all participants who made time in their busy day to attend this session and to learn from our expert partners. And once again, thank you to our presenters, Carolyn, for being a champion for children and speaking to the power and value of multilingualism and promoting this experience in your home, in your own home with your own children. Rebecca, for furthering the research and offering invaluable resources to the field, including the Multilingual Learning Toolkit, and for being an active partner in conversations around young MLLs. We very much appreciate you here at the CDE. Bernadette, for promoting asset-oriented mindsets, uplifting teacher preparation as a lever to strengthen dual language programs. We're really thankful to have your voice here. Anya, for reminding us all of the role of coherence when making an impact, as well as the significance of leveraging oral language and connecting to content. Lisa, for discussing how screening and assessment helps us understand student language experience as well as content knowledge. Veronica, for speaking to the importance of professional learning to prepare educators to respond to student needs and affordances. Amara, for highlighting teaching in the home language as a critical strategy to support multilingual learners and preserve and strengthen first languages, as well as the importance of relationship with kids and family engagement. And of course, thanks to our panel facilitator, Ashley, for facilitating a lively discussion and reminding us to look to the Multilingual Learning Toolkit to be overwhelmed in the best possible way. I'd also like to thank our CDE team. Without their tireless effort and passion, this webinar would not have been such a great success. Steve, Shanna, GQ, of course, Ashley, Lori, Beth, Teresa, or Teresa, Patricia, our entire UPK implementation and support office, Valentina, Anna, Nicole, Stacy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Kate, our technology services department, and so many great minds working together to make this event happen. Thank you to the entire team. And thank you to all of the participants for thinking about students centering multilingual learners on an everyday basis and making sure that you're attending to their language development, regardless of their identification. We greatly appreciate you as we uplift EL Roadmap policy together. And I'd like to leave you with two quotes. The first from Kenji Hakuda, who said, "Language is the key to cultural identity. Supporting home languages in education helps preserve cultural heritage and promotes diversity." And the second quote from Frank Smith, who said, "One language sets you in a corridor for life. Two languages open every door along the way." May you all work together to open every door along the way for the students you serve. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us.